Hey everyone, what is going on? Hope you are doing very well. In today's video, I'm going to be walking through the 5 items that I think is the most important for speedrun vehicles for me. Now, if you guys have a bunch of items to add on to this, make sure you leave it in the comment section below. This area can be somewhat subjective, but I think we can agree on some of the most major items that we absolutely require for speedrun vehicles. I'm going to go through this video with respect to the RC8X. This is the first radio that I've had that actually contains all of the features, and I don't have to add on any additional modules to get those features and functionalities. Now, the first thing that we're going to talk about is not included in this list. However, it is probably one of the more obvious ones, and that is when you get your radio, one of the things that you absolutely need to be good with and happy with is the feel of the radio. When this radio is in my hand and in its natural resting position, it feels solid, it feels really good and comfortable. This is important because you want to feel confident enough to be able to steer and direct the car in the direction that you intend to run it. Very important when it comes to speed run vehicles at high speeds. Once you have a radio in your hand that feels good, you can go through the features and functionality to make sure it has exactly what you require. So the very first item on my list, and the first item that should be on your list as well, I would expect, is a radio that provides long range and a good, solid, reliable, high quality link between the transmitter and the receiver. This is important for obvious reasons. We don't want to lose our vehicle, and our vehicle tends to go out quite far. When it comes to surface vehicles, the guys doing speed runs are definitely going to be in the top tier of requirements for high amounts of range. This is very important not only for the car guys, but for the boat guys as well, who are doing those high speed, long passes to build up tremendous amounts of speed there. Now, luckily, the Radiolink, as I've tested in a previous video, this thing can do 500 to 600 meters in a previous version and model. I will be checking this to see if it actually matches, and I'll be looking at quality of link as well. Now, for the bunch of running that I've already done on this, I have not yet experienced any dropout of signal upwards of about 150 to 200 meters or so, and that's quite a far ways out. We're going to now jump to the second most important item on my list of 5, which is going to be talking about the throttle delay functionality of this radio. The RC8X has a delay function, and it has delay all the way up to 10 seconds. Let's take a look at exactly what that looks like on the radio screen. Here is the main screen on the Radiolink. Here I'm going to set this up for the Limitless V2. I've not yet run the Limitless V2 on this specific radio. We're going to set it up for that in some time. So at first, let's take a look at the throttle delay. So I want to show you on the main screen here. You can see that channel 2 that does represent the actual throttle channel. And here you can see as I pull the trigger, it immediately responds and shows us that here on channel 2. And I've pushed in the brake direction. You can see it showing that as well. So let's go into the main screen here. This is our main screen where all of the settings can be found. And within this main settings screen, we're going to go to the throttle delay. So I'm going to pick throttle delay. I'm going to look at this here. So right now what I have is all points being selected. I can also choose between high and a low point, and then also 3 points. What I'm going to look for in this specific example is I'm going to do all points. I want them to be equally delayed, all the same, all the way up to 100% throttle. And I'm going to do this here and adjust it. So we're going to go all the way down. This doesn't make much of a difference as we're near the higher number. So let's jump all the way down to a very low number. As such, we're going to choose 2, and we're going to go back to our main screen and see what that's done. So now I pull the trigger, and you can see the delay there happen and occur. It's quite long. It looks like it's about maybe 6 to 8 seconds or so until we get all the way, there it is, 100%. So you can see that's a major delay and some really good functionality for speedrun vehicles. This is, in my opinion, an absolute requirement to have on your speedrun vehicles. And the other thing that's really important is once I'm at full throttle, I do not want any delay going into reverse into brake. So not reverse, into the brake setting here, into the brake position. We're now going to look at the throttle delay and specifically select the high and low point. So here we have high and low point. You can see high is set to 100. That's the fastest response that you get, so there is no delay. And the low point here is set to number 1. That's the maximum amount of delay that we can get. And then the point crossover is at 30. So you can see there the green represents the low, and all of this red bar, that's the high throttle position. So as I pull the trigger to full, you can see what happens. we get an instantaneous throttle, and then we're going to get that maximum delay, and as soon as it hits 30%, it hits 100% throttle with no delay. From 30 to 100%, no delay, instantaneous 100% throttle. So you can see how this functionality can be important for you as you're running a specific type of vehicle. So the 3-point, it's the same idea, but now you get 3 different areas to control the amount of delay for you. That's definitely functionality that is quite important for me to be able to control the throttle setting. Let's jump into the next item, which really deals with a nice clean screen that shows me all the data, especially being able to monitor the channel data that we're actually selecting and triggering. Another point that I want to bring up here is the battery that is on board the transmitter. This is also something that's very important to me. I don't want to be stuck with a limitation like I am on some of my Spectrum radios where I can only go up to about the 6.5 volt mark. It really limits the amount of batteries that I can use, and I certainly cannot use a 2S LiPo. With the Radiolink RC8X, this is not the case. Even with the older version of the RC6GS, it is also not the case. You can use all the way up to a 3-cell LiPo, and it is going to be good. So I'll show you exactly what I mean by the screen here. We are in the main settings screen. What I want to do is go back to the main screen to show you this top section of the radio. This is something that is very important to me, to have a very clear understanding of what's going on with all of the channel functions. So if I go and steer the car or just show you me turning the wheel here on the radio, you can see exactly what's happening, and we go all the way up to 100. The endpoint adjustment is set so that we get about 100 there maximum for steering. This is important because a lot of the speedrun vehicles that I do use don't get anywhere close to the 100 mark. I tried to maximize this out so we get best resolution, but a lot of the cases I'm actually stuck with going around 60 or even maybe less than that. Another thing here that you can see is the throttle. You can see if I got this massive delay in, you can see it building there. I like to be able to see that types of functionality. And if I hit another switch, for example, I'm going to hit channel 4, you can see how it actually displays channel 4. So it says channel 4 100, and if I hit it again, it confirms that it's at minus 100. So it's a 2-position switch, and this is the switch that is located right under the steering wheel. Very easy to access, which is something I really do like. I don't have a purpose or reason for it yet, but I'm sure one will come. Another thing that's really important about this screen is it does show some telemetry information right here. We're going to be talking about this very shortly, and then it shows some of the trim functions. Our digital trim 1 through 4 is displayed here, as well as the gyro gain, which is controlling here the knob, which is DL1 and PS3. Dial 1 and PS stands for push button on this Radiolink. So this is something that I really like, having that yellow bar and seeing the exact amount that we're controlling here. You can see that on channel 8 be adjusted there as well. So really cool to be able to see stuff like that. And the digital trim, if I use DT1, we can start to see our steering trim going up to minus 10, and if I switch it all the way across, you can see it go to plus 10. So we see that both on the top as we're doing it live, and then we get a readout right here on the bottom as to where we are. I really like to have this information displayed to know where I am with all of these different functions and features. And then if we flip over to the bottom side, this is the battery that's actually included in the Radiolink. This battery is important because I do not like to use standard throwaway cells, and I certainly don't want to put in 8 AAAs or even 8 AAs or 8 of anything. One battery is good enough for me. This doesn't really maximize the full size available in this Radiolink battery compartment. However, it looks like the 1700 milliamp hour is getting me a decent amount of runtime, and I can easily quickly charge it up within an hour and get back out there and run. If I want to upgrade the battery, I'm sure I can find something that will fit this a little bit tighter, giving me a more capacity than the 1700 milliamp hour that this currently has. I can't stress how important this is for me to have a rechargeable battery with a conveniently located connector port so that we can do anything we want here in this location. Very important. I'm glad this radio has it. Now, number 4 on the list is actually something new to me. I've not used this yet on a speed run vehicle, but I can't wait to be able to use this functionality, and I'll explain more about it as we're showing and I'm displaying it on the screen. You already saw it on the screen. Let's talk about it in more detail. Here's the telemetry screen. We already saw that, but what is really new to me is seeing the motor batteries voltage. This is here under the EXT, and it is currently stating 11.3 volts. The accuracy of this, of course, is important. It came out to 11.35 volts on my multimeter, which is probably close enough, being within about a half a volt or so. And you can see how I get that right here on the receiver. I'm able to go and plug the battery directly into a port right on the receiver. I don't need any other modules like you will find on some other types of radios. One of the reasons this is important to me is because I do want to monitor the voltage after I make a specific pass. We know the voltages and how they correspond to the percentage of battery capacity remaining in the battery. I don't want to be making my high-speed run passes when I'm at, let's say, 30 or 40%. I know that I'm not going to get the maximum top speed if my battery is nearly fully depleted. And a lot of the times I'm not really comfortable with understanding and knowing how much capacity I still have in the battery. We only use the car for a very short spurt of time, and as we're getting to the destination and driving the car all the way out there, we really don't use that much battery capacity. Let's now talk about the last item, the fifth item on my list, which deals with a throttle cutoff. This is something that I believe is often overlooked for radio control vehicles, and it might be because it's not something you absolutely need. In fact, you don't need an actual throttle cutoff. I do believe this is important to have because you could bump the throttle, and it can be quite dangerous when we're dealing with a car that can spin a ton of RPM on the tires. You don't want this thing to fire up when you're not expecting it, when you're holding the car or you're looking at the car and for whatever reason. So the cutoff makes certain that no matter what happens to that throttle trigger, you're not going to speed up and run up the car. This is how I have mine currently set up. So the throttle cutoff, we can go into the screen here. It's going to be actually called something like engine cutoff, engine cut, there it is. So the engine cut, I have now selected the switch to PS4. I've turned on this functionality and it shows the preset point. I want 0% throttle essentially, and the status is on the trigger. So now let's go to our monitor. This is why this is one of the most important things for me to have. I want to be able to show that. So when I actually have this throttle cut off, that's where you see it in the yellow bar. Again, I love that yellow bar coming up and telling me what has been triggered. Now I can actually use the throttle, and you can see that it's slowly coming up because we got that massive delay there. So now if I go into the throttle cutoff, we can check to make sure it's on PS4, and it is, and now I can select that button. Now a lot of guys are saying this button on the RC8X is really easy to press, and that's exactly why I chose this button to be the throttle cutoff. It's really easy for me to cut the throttle just by hitting this massive large button here on the bottom. So now we have the throttle cutoff on, and if I pull the trigger, you can see nothing is going to happen there on the throttle screen. So if your buddy's trying to help you and you're dialing in the car, you're tuning the car there on the ground, if they pick up the radio, there's no way that this is going to affect it, becoming dangerous for you to work on the car. I've seen it before where you're working on a bench and someone comes by and tries to help you out by operating the steering or something, pulls the trigger by accident by bumping it, and the car ends up running up the wheels and in some cases flies off the bench and crashes down on the ground. This is definitely not something you want to have happen, and it's very easy to set up a throttle cutoff so it does not happen. You make certain of it. That's my list of 5 items that I believe is important for speedrun vehicles. And more specifically, the top 3 there that I listed are a must-have for me. I'm interested in knowing what are your must-haves or nice features to have on radios that you prefer for speedrun vehicles. Now I want to talk about 2 more things here. The first being, it would be a nice thing for us to be able to entertain the idea of FPV for speedrun vehicles. I'm not talking about using FPV to actually make the pass. I'm not sure how that would work out. But to use FPV to be able to drive the car back to us, that might be something that would have some sort of advantage for us. One of the things I did want to discuss is radio latency. This radio here can do very well when it comes to radio latency, getting all the way down to 3 milliseconds. And I'll show you that here in a second. As for me, I didn't place it on the list here of 5 items because radio latency is definitely not one of the things that I'm looking for. I'm trying to slow everything down. Now we did talk about throttle delays. However, However, there is the functionality of being able to put these delays on the steering as well. Slowing the steering speed down could end up helping you when you're at high rate of speed for your speed run vehicles. Now let's take a look at the radio latency that we can get on our radio. Here we're looking at the main screen. We can go into the main settings screen, and from here we want to access the receiver settings. Here's the receiver settings that gives us the information for our servo speed, the latency. We're gonna click on the 14 milliseconds. That's pretty much the factory standard for a lot of the servos and works with analog servos. We can access 4 milliseconds and we can also access 3 milliseconds. As for me, I'm gonna continue using 14 millisecond until I see a reason to bump that down to the 3 or 4 range. I do believe the RC8X at 3 milliseconds competes with the top tier performance of latency for many other radios. I think the best that is offered in the industry is somewhere around 2 milliseconds. So 3 is not that far behind, and I doubt that anyone's really gonna feel a difference under 5 milliseconds or so. Well guys, I'm really impressed by this RC8X radio. I'm hoping that it does become my mainstream radio, my go-to radio for all of my radio control vehicles. As I continue to figure this thing out, as I'm only scratching the surface on features and functionality, it may very well become my mainstream radio. I'll leave a link in the description below so you can check out this here on the Amazon at a hobby store. As always guys, like the video if you do. Don't forget to hit that sub button so that I can see you guys in the next video. Thanks a lot for watching. See you in the next one.